Juan Economic Development Corporation meeting to order. First item on our agenda is our roll call. Begin with my right, please.
Jesse Zambrano, attorney.
Rene Villarreal, Executive Director.
Cynthia Gutierrez, Secretary of the Board.
Arturo Guajardo Jr., President.
Mayor Mario Garza, Assistant Secretary.
Neto Guajardo, board member.
Pedro Contreras, board member. Thank you. Our next item is our Executive Director's Administrative Report. Mr. Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. President. The past few weeks, we started our talks with the PSJ ISD in collaboration with UTRGV about an incubator. I brought it up here at the past couple directors' reports. And I provided you a outline of all those who were in attendance, as well as a summary of what was talked about at that meeting. It was a lengthy meeting, about 2 hours or so. And from my perspective, it seems with or without the EDC, this project is going to move forward. They're pretty serious about it. They've got a lot of heavy hitters from the entrepreneurial world on hand to join this effort with the PSJ school district. And where the EDC may play a role is it's kind of a fun role that maybe we later on down the road, as they have entrepreneurs making small businesses here in San Juan, the EDC may want to come around and do something like create some sort of grant where they can award, have like a Shark Tank type style of little event, maybe once a year, and do something like that. So the involvement from the EDC is minimal, and it's maybe just primarily from a monetary standpoint, where we would come in and assist. We're not talking much at all. The school district would be the ones who maintain the building. They did say for sure that they would maintain the building.
The building you're talking about, the old Sorensen Elementary, right? That's what you had mentioned to us?
Correct. The old Sorensen Elementary, right up north of the street from where we're at. And so the building has a lot of potential. Everybody on hand was very excited about the project, and we're going to have a follow-up meeting there at the site, at the location, I think next week. So we'll keep you posted about that. If anyone has any questions, you can always call me or ask me any questions about that. I also included an update on a mini grant that we passed, and you can see this is already up. I included a picture of the project the way it looks now. The signage there with the window graphics, and this is already up now. So if you pass by there, that's something that the EDC had a direct hand in making come to life there. So that's a really good project, and I will keep you up to date with all the projects and how we're doing, so you'll know, like, oh, okay, that was us, and so we can all have a good understanding of the work we're doing here. Lastly, tomorrow we have a groundbreaking ceremony, 10 o'clock a.m. for Texas National Bank, and everyone on the board, the city directors, and the city commission and mayor are all invited. So we've invited the Border Business, well, I invited Texas Border Business Magazine, Concepto Magazine, the Monitor, and the Advance News. Well, this will be published in all those outlets. So.
Comments, concerns by the board?
I have President, one on the mini grant update, not necessarily on the grant question, is on the building. There are 2 other offices in that building, is that correct, Mr. Villarreal?
Correct, they're in the middle one.
Okay, those other offices, what's the status on them?
I'm not too sure. I guess they're available for lease at this time. I think one of them at one time was like a cell phone type establishment, and they're not around anymore. And I think one of them was like a tax office, but there was a while back, yeah, there was. But I'll follow up with that, Mr. Contreras, and let you know and how we can assist with getting somebody in there.
That was my point, to
Mhm.
fill them in. Thanks.
On to our first item on the action item agenda, and that is discussion, consideration, possible action, if any, on purchasing advertisement space in the official guide to the Rio Grande Valley.
Thank you. Under item number 1, I've provided the board with some advertising prices. And what this is the Rio Grande Valley Guide to the Rio Grande Valley. This is put out annually by the Rio Grande Valley Partnership. They've always put one out. They did not put one out last year because they were kind of in a turnover year, but they're back at it. And the RGV Partnership is also the same organization that holds every 2 years the RGV Day at the Capitol, where all his elected officials and city officials and the big wigs from around the Rio Grande Valley, all the departments, TxDOT, USDA, all those, all the state departments, head up to the Capitol and stand united in one voice to lobby for things that concern the valley. And so they're the ones who put that on. And at the same time, I had them create a little, as we're starting to promote San Juan and get San Juan back on the map and getting our word out there, they created a little ad for the Basilica. This is just the start of what I think we hope to see, a big movement where people start seeing San Juan in more places. And so the thought process behind this was that when people think of San Juan, they think about the Basilica. So we went ahead and put a description in there, wanted to make it enticing for people to come. And so I think it's a good opportunity for us to go ahead and do the vertical ad for $1,850. It'll be in there all year, as well as this would be pushed out digitally on their social media and other prints that they do throughout the year. And so the RGV Partnership is a really good contact to have on our side. And then we can be in the know as far as capital events and things going on, luncheons with some of the elected officials from the state or things like that. We,
As far as state religion, we did? Okay, good.
That's the first thing I told him, was
Okay.
make sure you go meet with the Basilica and get their blessing.
And how about as far as us? Yeah, I know the Basilica, I think they would like that, but were we okay?
If we have their consent to do it, yeah, we should be okay.
Okay. Excuse me.
Are you gonna ask Renee to ask them if they wanted to split it with us? We
That's
weren't
an idea.
successful with that.
It's an
Why not? Good idea. Maybe go with a bigger one.
Something bigger.
Yeah.
Split the cost.
yeah, it's a little pricey, but the return on investment is there as being involved with a partnership, and
Sergio Contreras' group, right? He's the one
Yes.
who's
Correct.
leading that.
he's a
Partnership.
director.
Who's the contact person you made in reference to this matter? Do you
Sergio
know?
Contreras.
No, in reference to the
Oh,
the church.
Pablo and the father himself.
Okay.
I spoke with both of them. I met with them. I showed it to them, and we got their blessing. And so,
Got the blessing for the picture, but not a contribution.
yeah.
You're recommending the $1,850 ones?
Yes, sir.
Which is a third of a page, and I'm assuming this is pretty much actual size, right? That's about a third of a page there.
Correct.
Correct.
Second.
You want to make the motion?
Oh, I thought you made the
Oh,
motion.
no,
No.
I'm asking for one. Okay, Mr. Guajardo?
Yeah, I'll make the
makes
motion.
Okay, Mayor makes the motion.
Second.
We got a second by Commissioner Guajardo. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries.
One
And that is
discussion, one-third page, yes. One discussion, I'm in favor of this, and maybe next year, contact the luxury vehicle owners, and maybe we can, if the church might not participate financially, maybe these Lexus and Mercedes-Benz, maybe we can share the cost with them and get a full page.
try. I know that they're getting to print pretty soon here, but I'll still put it out there and ask them.
Very good. We'll move on to our next item. It's discussion, consideration, possible action, if any, to purchase traffic count data report
From Aldana Engineering and Traffic Design LLC.
Yes, we had brought this before the board at the last meeting, and the invoice was pretty high as we were looking at 5 traffic counts. The board decided to go ahead and do one. I did speak with the county, Armando Garza, and they do have some traffic counts for Cesar Chavez, and FAR EDC says that they'll be getting the FAR traffic
Which is
counts.
why the reason we narrowed it to one.
Which is why we narrowed it to one.
So we wouldn't be redundant, right?
Correct. So this quote is for the traffic counts for just north of the expressway on Raul Longoria.
Attached here, what is the,
The price would be $1,200. These are the only local guys that any engineering company can do this, but these guys specialize in that, and they'll go out there and do it and perform it. They were actually recommended by TxDOT.
how long are they gonna have the count going for?
1 week, 2 weeks? I'm sorry,
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Oh, yes, 2 weeks.
How far are they going, Mr. Villar, as far as, I know you mentioned north of the expressway, right?
Right.
Up to where?
I think right there between the expressway and Sergeant Trevino, in that area,
Just that little small area there?
just that little small area. This would be coming out of our professional services budget. There is money there at this time for that. The area was chosen because as it's one of our major thoroughfares going north and south, and we have that area of vacant property there where the old Garza Peña Elementary was. As we want to promote the city, this is good data to have and say, these are our traffic counts. I mean, that's one of the first things that anybody who wants to develop the area, well, what's the traffic counts? I mean, if you don't have traffic, you know, that's,
But I would venture to say that the highest numbers are gonna be coming in and out of the Basilica, and we're failing to capture that little segment, right?
the south side is owned by TxDOT, and if you go to the website, they already have the number there.
Okay, very
So-
good.
Mhm.
Eduardo, that's exactly what I was thinking. If you want to capture the highest count, it has to be south of the expressway. Capturing the north side, is it going to benefit us at all, or can we just go by what TxDOT has?
Well, TxDOT has the south side. If we get the north, we've pretty much got a puzzle, we've got every piece,
Have both.
pretty much, every intersection pretty much done. And so we can create some literature to that extent as we're promoting EDC. If we go to the ICSC conferences or anything like that, we've got that data in hand. It's up to the board ultimately, if you guys want to.
We have this money allocated this time around, right?
Yes, sir. They're the only local ones. The other ones are out of San Antonio that I know of, and I just decided to go local. I figured that the price.
A bidding process when it comes to this kind of, is professional services? Okay? We're okay? Just want to make sure we don't violate anything. Thank you, Jess.
Now, I will say that we want to have something like this, but if we want to wait to wait a little further on how that piece of land develops, or as we get closer, we could always hold off if you all want, or we can go ahead and do it now.
I think we need to go forward right now, because, I mean, we don't know when it's better to have the counts before they start building out there, so they can see that we have more traffic.
And these counts will be good, like, for how long, do you know? Will be good?
I would say about, I mean, ultimately, if we develop the area,
Right.
then
And the
those
reason
traffic
I'm
counts are
saying
gonna
is that
go up.
They don't wanna, I don't wanna come back and they're gonna say, you know what, these are outdated, we need some more data on it.
As often as you want to do a new one, I mean,
Right.
Should hold for at least 2 years, at least.
It looks like we have everything going right now, right, hopefully?
south side.
We
but I
commute
mean,
that way.
the
The
mornings
nor-
is
Crazy.
pretty much bumper to bumper
Yes.
from the expressway all the way to
Nolana.
And on that line, Mr. Zambrano, that was my next question. What would be would there be a major price difference if you were to get the counts from where you're asking all the way up to 495? Going back to the traffic that Mr. Zambrano was talking about as well. Do you, by any chance, do you know?
The price is pretty substantial, because last time we had 5 of them, and it was around 6,000, which I thought was way
Well,
too
what I'm
much,
saying
but,
is get the traffic count all the way up to 495.
I think it's more of like a spot, like they're looking at this spot, and then they're looking at maybe like the 495 intersection, and then they'd want to do another one on Nolana, so it'd be like they'd charge us for 3, if that was the case.
Okay.
spots, it probably costs more, obviously, if you wanted to know the difference. But I think at this point, you kind of just want to know in general, what is it like on the north side? Maybe this is the first step, and then in the future, if you wanted to
Well,
do
for
more.
495.
And this is kind of the priority area, the expressways where we're focusing our resources. And then, I mean, 495 is already developed, and what's not developed will probably develop on its own. What needs the boost or the shot is the expressway. That's where we're kind of focusing on, so.
Doesn't hurt to add that traffic as well too, you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say, but, no, I get you.
So you're gonna have this section, if we approve this today, you'll have the south from TxDOT, you'll have what Commissioner Precinct 2 is doing as well, which is what section?
He says he has the north side, and I think he said he was gonna look around for the south Cesar Chavez one.
Our EDC is also doing one,
They're gonna be doing I-Road,
I-Road,
so we've got the whole
and
package,
they'll share that with you?
and they'll share that with me.
When you said I-Road, you're talking about what intersection? Veterans and
Veterans,
Expressway, Veterans 495, Veterans and Ridge, which one?
north and south of the expressway,
North and
Look,
south?
where we're getting these is where we hope
So
to.
FAR did one north and south, not just the one side.
They haven't done them, but
They haven't
their director told me that he's been meaning to get it done, and so he's gonna be getting it done here soon.
Because I was thinking in lines with what the mayor was saying and Mr. Zambrano were talking about, there is heavy traffic on 495 and Raul Longoria. You know, I don't know if we can survive with the count we have from TxDOT on the south of the expressway, and maybe switch to get a count on the north side. And when we're talking about north side, I'm not talking about North Expressway, I'm talking about 495, intersection 495 Raul Longoria, because that would be a total different count. I mean, total different area compared to the expressway. And I understand that the focus could be on the expressway growth, but I'm not too sure if we shouldn't also focus on 495. I mean, it's a huge area, corridor, and we don't have any information and counts in that area. But it's just something to think about.
We could bring that one up later. I can get a quote for that one if you'd like for a later meeting.
So right now, you just like to approve this one, right?
This one's on the table, right?
I make a motion to
Second,
go ahead and accept
sorry,
the count for the north side of the expressway.
second.
Second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is discussion, consideration, and possible action, if any, on resolution approving the San Juan Economic Development Corporation Plan of finance pertaining to the contemplated issuance of obligations to be designated as San Juan Economic Development Corporation Sales Tax Revenue Refund Bonds, Series 2018, authorizing the corporation staff and the corporation's financial advisor and bond counsel to proceed with this plan of finance and authorizing other matters related to the foregoing. It's a mouthful.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Chris Vela, the city's financial advisor. He's going to be doing a presentation on the on the EDC's leverage fund.
Mr. Vela, welcome.
Mr. Board President, members, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Vela with Hilltop Securities Financial Advisors to the San Juan Economic Development Corporation, for the record. We were asked to prepare an updated presentation on the plan of finance with some additional options, and we'd like to reiterate what we presented the last time, as well as some expanded views that we have prepared as well at the request of your staff. Just a little quick summary on the bond buyer revenue index on page 3 of the presentation. The current average is a 480, the 20-year average is a 493, the 20-year max is a 648, and the 20-year minimum is a 298. As you can see, interest rates have been moving up. There's no doubt. You can see that on the far end of the chart, where it says current 480, and you can see how rates have been going up. Now moving on to the plan of finance on page 5. The San Juan Economic Development Corporation currently has 2 debt obligations outstanding. The Texas Leverage Fund, the TLF loan, with a principal amount outstanding of $1,048,575.57. And of course, it's prepayable at any time. It has an interest rate, a current interest rate of 5.25, subject to change as prime rate changes. Prime rate is equal to the Fed funds rate plus 3%. Interest rate when loan agreement was entered to was 3.25. The last interest rate change from 5% to 5.25 was on 9/27 of 18. Another 25 basis points upward change is expected in December of 18 as the Federal Reserve continues to increase the Fed funds rate. Final maturity of the Texas Leverage Fund loan rate is April the 1st of 25. Interlocal agreement with the city for payment of a portion of the Series 216 general obligation refunding bonds. There's an outstanding principal amount of $1,690,000 outstanding prepayable until 2/15/26, and the amount outstanding as of 2/15/26 would be $890,000. That is the next call date. And those bonds have a fixed rate of 3.18. That transaction, as I spoke to you the last time, was done back in 16 in conjunction with some city debt. Now, this isn't exactly EDC debt. This was debt that was done by the city, and the city has an interlocal agreement to pay back that debt. So you make transfers from the EDC over to the city for the repayment of the debt. But the savings were passed on to the EDC as a result of that refunding. So the existing situation that we have today, the gross lien of the Senior Lien Texas Leverage Fund loan is column B. That's your outstanding debt on the Texas Leverage Fund. That's what you're paying today. The interlocal agreement with the city on the 216 bonds, those are your payments. So your total obligations is column D, starting with 334, 337, 339, all the way totaling over the life of $3,448,314. Now, if you move over to column E, these are the revenues that the Economic Development Corporation has on an annual basis. If you subtract column D from column E, your balance is 592. Your coverage on the senior lien debt would be 486. On all debt, it would be 1.77. Very healthy coverage, like I told you the last time. The San Juan Economic Development Corporation has the opportunity to refinance the Texas Leverage Fund loan at a tax-exempt fixed interest rate. I'm going to stop here for just a minute and deviate a little bit, because I want you to I want to commend your staff for the work that they did in making the necessary due diligence efforts to qualify this loan for a tax exempt rate. The bond attorneys had previously stated to us that it could not be done unless it was done on a taxable basis because we could not prove what the actual uses of the money was for. And was it actual tax exempt uses or were they private activity uses? So Mr. Villarreal and his staff, we got together with them, we met at our office, and we discussed the need to go through this, and they very diligently worked with the city staff, with Leroy Gonzalez and his staff, and they were able to bring up all of the documents that were necessary, and we were able to prove to the bond attorney that this loan was in fact used in a tax exempt purpose and what those uses were for. And the difference is the fact that you can issue on a tax exempt basis versus a higher rate, which would be a taxable basis. So that means savings to the San Juan Economic Development Corporation. So again, thank you to your staff for the work that they did. The San Juan Economic Development Corporation could fix the interest rate on the Texas Leverage Fund loan, which is a variable rate loan, to lower total fixed debt service payments from approximately $337 to $258 for all economic development debt, including the interlocal agreement for payment of a portion of a series of the 2016 general obligation refunding bonds. The sales tax revenue refunding bond, Series 18, would be structured approximately for 13 years with semi-annual payments in February and August. February the 15th, principal and interest, August 15th, interest only, first principal and interest payment on 8/15, and final maturity on 2/15. The bonds would be sold as a private placement to a sophisticated investor, i.e. a bank or other financial institution, no bond rating, no public offering of securities, no bond underwriter, limited disclosure, and continuing disclosure obligations. EDC staff and financial advisor would work with a placement agent to create a competitive environment for a private placement of the bonds, and the bonds would be approved by the Attorney General. The San Juan Economic Development Corporation sales tax revenue bonds, Series 18, are estimated to be approximately $1,085,000. It would take about $1,020,000 to pay off the Texas Leverage Fund loan principal, plus interest to the payoff date, approximately $65,000 in financing costs, $25,000 in fiscal fees, and $36,000 in legal fees, and $3,700 in budget contingency. Now, page 9 depicts, I'm going to start with, on the left, with the sales tax revenues of the EDC, 926, the gross pledge senior lien Texas Leverage Fund loan, the TLF, and your associated debt service with it every year. Assuming that we refinanced the Texas leverage loan, that would be your, we would subtract that, and then plus the refunding bonds, and this was under the original scenario of an extending the term from 25 to 32. The interlocal agreement with the city payment, that's the amount that you transfer every year to the city for the payment of the 16 bonds and your total obligations. You can see that your total outstanding obligations would decrease to 258, 257, 256, et cetera, from the current levels of 332. The surplus cash flow would be in the 600 and some, that would be applicable to operation and maintenance, incentives for developments, et cetera. Look at what happens to your coverage under that assumption. And then look at what happens to your all coverage versus the existing situation. On the next page, the economic development has the opportunity. Here, what we're going to analyze is no extension of the Texas Leverage Fund loan. In other words, keeping the same maturity of 25, not going to 32. And let's see what happens there. The San Juan Economic Development Corporation has the opportunity to refinance the Texas Leverage Fund loan at a tax-exempt fixed interest rate. the Economic Development Corporation could fix the interest rate of the TLF loan to achieve total fixed debt service payments at approximately 328 for all San Juan debt, including the interlocal agreement for payment of a portion of the Series 16 general obligation refunding bonds. The sales tax revenue refunding bonds, the 18 bonds, will be structured over approximately 6 years with semi-annual payments in February and August, February the 15th P&I, August the 15th interest only, first principal and interest payment on 8/15 of 19, and final maturity on 25. The bonds would be sold as a private placement to a sophisticated investor, i.e. a bank. No bond rating, no public offering of securities, the same structure as the last one. EDC staff and the FA would work together. The San Juan Economic Development Sales Tax Revenue Bond Series are estimated to be approximately $1,085,000, the same statistics as stated before. Now, moving on to page 12, we start out with the column B, the revenues, the existing debt for the Texas Leverage Fund, subtracting the existing debt, plus the revenue refunding bonds for Series 18. Now, notice on this one that we don't extend them all the way to 32, we keep them at 25. And then the 16 bonds are all the way to 32, so they stay there as they were. So your total obligations are 320, 333, 325, 326, et cetera. And your cash flow is diminished a little bit from the last time, and so is your coverage on the senior lien debt, and all coverage also goes down. That is the impact of the shorter debt, not stretching it out. Okay? Now, next steps on page 14. The Plan of Finance presentation to the EDC today. EDC Board considered resolution approving Plan of Finance. The Plan of Finance presentation to the City Commission as an information item. Remember that the City Commission has to also approve as well. Deadline for prospective purchasers of the Series 18 to submit proposals. EDC Board reviews the financing proposals from prospective purchasers and considers issuance of the Series 18 bonds. City Commission considers and approves the resolution authorizing the issuance of the Series 18 bonds. Attorney General approves the sale, and on December the 19th, we would expect to close and the delivery of funds and pay off to the Texas Leverage Fund as well.
Mr. Villa, if you can explain to the board the importance of the closing before the end of the year.
Okay, good point. Also remember that, that I've often said the limitation of $10 million in any calendar year being bank qualified debt. That was the other thing that we're trying to achieve. It's very timely to do it at the end of the year because typically you don't see a lot of issuance at the end of the year, and bank qualified $10 million limitation allows banks to bid at a lower rate because they get a benefit from IRS. And this would allow us to close prior to 12/31, and your 10 million would start again in January. So it's a strategy to issue bank qualified debt under 10 million in any calendar year.
Because the city will have upcoming projects next year, and we don't want to.
Exactly. The city has other projects it wants to do, and when we start totaling it all up, we're going to be beyond the 10 million, and we would not be able to get the bank qualified rates. So this would be the optimum financing for the Economic Development Corporation, both as to the bank qualified status under 10 million and also the tax exempt because of the work that the staff did. Any other questions on that? Okay. Now, discussion of financing for future projects. The steps for undertaking debt financing of new projects would generally be as follows. First of all, we need to define the project scope. We need to understand what it is that we're doing. We need to convey that to the bond attorneys as well. We need to do the notice and the hearings that are necessary, quantify the cost of the scope, develop the plan of finance, the financing method, parameters, financial implications for near term and future, authorize resolution for publication of public hearing, execution of financing subject to City Commission. Staff, we have been informed by your staff that they would possibly need approximately $800,000 deposited to an acquisition fund or to some sort of a fund for the Economic Development Corporation. Remember that the last time that we had qualified anywhere up to a little bit over $1 million, et cetera, et cetera. But Mr. Villarreal has indicated to us that $800,000 would suffice in terms of what he would need.
Right, and that was the project. That's, if we get, well, as long as we to it as Project Corner, if everyone's familiar with where we're at, or we could go to executive. Right.
Mr. Vela, if I can intervene before you continue. So from last week's meeting, I had the exhibits, and I'm assuming they were from your Hilltop Securities, Inc. It was 3 pages. And I'm looking at the gross pledge senior lien Texas Leverage Fund number, and that was at 189, 289, all the way down. Now it's different. Why did it change just from Friday to today?
What page is it from the previous one?
2 of 3. If you look at column C, and then I'm looking at your new one, column C.
On the previous presentation?
It would have been our meeting from Friday. When was our meeting posted for? But that we didn't have a quorum?
Wednesday.
Last week's meeting, Wednesday. So this was the attachment from last week's meeting.
Which was the attachment from our previous meeting that we had.
Take a look at it.
I had looked at it and, did the math and looked, but now I'm dealing with different numbers, so I'm just wondering why.
It probably is an updated debt service with the new rates.
It's a 1345 difference all the way down, pretty much. It's 189, and now it was, what do you have here, 190? Yeah, 196.
I'll check into that, and the debt service is going to be what it is, but we'll double check that.
At the time of that meeting where that's from, which was the first presentation he made to us at the prior meeting, we didn't have the updated rate
Oh,
change
yeah,
yet.
we didn't have the updated
updated
debt
rate
service from
change.
the city.
That's what it is.
And
Yes.
this new one reflects the new
Okay.
5.25%.
Very good.
October the 8th, right?
For $800,000, 800 project funds plus a conservative financing cost of $60,000, assumes public hearing as early as January. Now, this money would be in fiscal year 19, in calendar year 19, so it would carry, because of the hearing, we don't have time to do it in this year. There's just no way to complete it, to sell it, and to have the hearings, and to do all of the things before December the 31st. 15-year amortization through 34, fixed taxable interest rate, private purpose, level debt service payments, new overall aggregate debt service payments, including the new 19 taxable bonds, would remain close to what the San Juan Economic Development Corporation is currently paying at approximately $343. Assumes private placement transaction, same financing method as the proposed Series 18 refunding bonds. Okay, now let's go to page 18 real quick. Column B are the net revenues, the sales tax revenues, the Texas leverage existing debt, the refinanced debt, the less the debt, and then the plus the sales tax refunding with the extension to 32. And then the 860,000, including the cost of issuance, and a drop of 800 to the acquisition fund, and the debt service. The interlocal with the city of San Juan, and your total debt column, pretty much what we kind of showed you before. It stays at the $300 and some odd thousand level. Your surplus cash flow, 590s, your coverage for the senior lien, and your coverage for all of the debt, together. Now, The next assumption is a staff analysis for an additional 800,000 plus a conservative financing cost, assumes public hearing as early as January, 15-year amortization, fixed year taxable interest rate. Oh, there's a difference here on the new money that we want to make. Since there's probably going to be private activity or the possibility of using the money for developer incentives, the recommendation is to use taxable rather than tax-exempt money. That way, there's no questions on the actual use of the money. New overall aggregate debt service payments of the San Juan, including the new taxable bonds, would remain close to what the San Juan is currently paying at approximately 412. Assumes private placement transactions, same financing method as the proposed series bonds. Okay, now page 20, the last page. Back to the sales tax revenues. Column C and column D remain the same. And then plus keeping the term on the refunding bonds the same, but on a tax-exempt basis. Okay? Instead of going to 32, we kept it at 25, which is the same term. And you notice that there's some savings, and the reason for the savings is because they're tax-exempt and they're shorter. And if you look at the interest rate, if you look at the footnote number 4, assume sales tax revenue at a tax-exempt rate of approximately 375. That's what if you kept them the same. Plus the new money on the age 60, plus the interlocal, look what happens to your commitment overall to debt service. It goes up from the about $65,000. Your coverage comes down somewhat in the early part of the maturity, stays pretty much the same for all debt, and the senior debt comes down somewhat. So that's the impact of doing the non-extension versus the extension.
So which one is showing the extension, scenario 2, scenario 1?
The non-extension would be page 20.
Scenario 2.
Scenario 2, let me straight. Scenario 2
Scenario
is
2
showing
refunded.
if we don't extend the term on our current leverage, we keep that at the same time it was going to expire, but we add the new money as well, right?
Correct.
And that puts our surplus cash flow
Your commitment goes
quite,
up.
it goes down, our surplus cash flow goes down quite a bit, right? Or by about 65,000 per year.
Villarreal, where are the 65,000 exactly in these two scenarios that you're referring
On
to?
scenario 1 and scenario 2, on page 18 and 20,
Yes, I
if
have
you
the
look
page.
at the
but-
where it says column I, surplus cash flow, on page 18, if you go to column I on page 20, our surplus cash flow goes down by about, from 581 to about 515 per year. Because we're not extending the term, we would be getting it, everything, and be paying it off by 2025.
Scenario 2 is not extending, which is the 515.
Right.
Scenario 1 is extending it, and it jumps up to 581,293.
And these are both with the additional 800,000.
But it cuts cash flow at the first few years, and then it increases at the last 8 or 9 years. You see it, so it's just a
100,000
shift of
difference,
money
yeah.
from sooner or later or sooner.
Scenario 1 will extend it all the way to 2033, and it's a huge jump, over 300,000 or close to 300,000. And scenario 2 starts to increasing to 2026 gradually, or at least not 300,000 in 1 year.
And well, the idea also is that if the project goes as planned, that our revenues would go up because of the tax that we seek to benefit from the project itself.
So I'm looking at one column only just to start off with, and that's column H, which is our debt service obligation. Currently, today, we're at 3,448,000 and change. Under scenario one, that goes up to 3,692,000.
300,000, right?
3,692,000. Scenario two goes to 3,465,000. Now, scenario one with the additional 800K goes to 4,966,000. Scenario two with the additional 800K goes to 4,739,000. So, to me, those are the numbers that I think we need to decide on what kind of debt we want to take on in comparison to what we're trying to accomplish here. Either we're going to decide to acquire property or not. We know what the surplus cash flow is. Mr. Vela's done a good job of showing us our debt service coverage here on these deals, which are healthy, right? In all these scenarios, we're
Yes.
good. It's just basically what the desires of the board are.
And just to be clear, Mr. Vela, today's item on the agenda isn't for new money, right? It's not for the additional, it's just,
No, it's just for the refunding.
right.
Financing the Texas Leverage Fund
Right.
portion, no more.
However, it is incumbent on what structure we use, whether we go with the 32 or the 25.
So the interest rate that we currently have is 5.25. It's, right, you said? That's the
I'm sorry,
current- The current interest rate, 5.25?
Yes, sir.
plus 3%.
No,
Right.
that's
No,
including
that
the 3%.
includes the
Oh, that,
3%.
I'm sorry.
So what would be the new interest rate?
We're looking at approximately the same interest rate, but fixing it,
Fixed?
Fixed.
At 5.25?
yes. We're estimating a 5% to 5.25%, estimate right now, for, how should I say, we usually, when we make presentations before the city, we usually use a current market conditions, and we pad them up either 30 to 50 basis points above.
The interest rate is better, but it's just becoming fixed.
Correct. Now, it could come down a little bit, but I don't want to promise it because I don't know what kind of market conditions we will establish.
But then it can increase as well, too.
That is correct.
Increase.
But the fixed won't.
Yeah, of course. Once it's fixed, it's locked in.
See, and that's the good thing about this whole thing, having done this, being able to, at the very minimum, get that tax exempt designation.
Right.
That was very, very, very positive.
Agree.
So then it comes down to whether we want to refinance at a fixed rate and whether we want to keep the terms ending in 2025 or we want to extend the terms. That's what's on the table, right?
If I
For
was
today?
looking at it from your end, what I would be looking at is, what do I want to accomplish here? Where do I want to keep my total commitments at the current level? Or do I want to increase them a little bit and shorten up my term on the Texas Leverage Fund? Because if you increase your commitment by approximately $60-some-odd thousand, like I said, you can still keep the structure and still finance, but your commitment goes from 334 to 4-something, 400 and some odd thousand. The question is, what budgetary impact does that have on your existing situation?
The scenario you just shared with us, that's 1 or 2?
Two.
2, you're talking about 2.
Yes, sir. Just wanted to be sure. See, you would go from 334 currently to 410 under scenario 2. Under scenario 1, you would stay in the 340s.
H.
Column H, yes, sir.
Question on the financing costs. Does that have to come out of, does the EDC pay that amount of 65,000? Do they pay that at the time of closing, or does that get rolled into the refinance, or how does that work?
It's in the total financing, it's in the par cost. There, no money would come out of the EDC.
So it's part of the,
Yes.
of the refinancing?
Part of
process.
the financing cost.
Mr. Bella, may, can you please, you referred to 4 under the comments in the bottom. On scenario 2, we have a tax exempt rate of 3.75% for illustration and discussion purpose only. But on scenario 1, it stays at 5%.
Okay, you're on page 4?
No, I'm looking at both, scenario 1 and 2. But I'm saying that in your notes in the bottom, you have 6 notes on each one. On item 4, do you see what I'm talking about?
Yes. You're talking about the sales tax refunding bonds, the 375?
Yes.
Okay, that's because they're shorter. They're only 6 years. Okay?
That's why it changes from a 3.75 to a 5?
Yes, sir.
And the second.
Now, the new money is taxable. It's not tax exempt, and of course, it's longer. And that's the reason why we're going with the 5 and the 5 1/4. I'm sorry, the 5 1/4. And of course, it's for illustration and discussion purposes only. Usually, we illustrate with higher numbers and we come in lower, but that's subject to market conditions as well,
You have a 3.75%, right?
on the tax exempt rate
Tax exempt.
and the shorter maturity.
Recommendation to us, Mr. Vela.
That's a hard one to, I would, for me to make a recommendation, I would have to understand more comprehensively your goals as an organization and what you're wanting to do. Because if you want to continue with your program, you obviously need money to continue your program. So if you need more money, you want to keep your commitments, at a lower number. If you anticipate your sales tax to be growing and the additional monies to make the debt service are not something that concerns you and something that is commensurate with your goals, then obviously the more, let's say, more conservative alternative is the best. The structured alternative provides you some cash relief, keeps you within the same levels, and allows you to go forward with some other, but it also costs you some money.
I'll say, I know Mr. Vela's more of our advisor, and so he's in a predicament where he's here to give advice. And I'll say that we're talking about refinancing and whether we want to extend the term, and in doing so, if we want to position ourselves to add future monies in the future for projects. And then keep in mind, for Project Corner, the one we're talking about, if all goes as planned and we sell that property, we get that money in return. Maybe at a profit. I don't know that we're looking to get a profit. I think we're looking to get economic development out of it, but just keep in mind that that money will eventually come back, which we can then pay it off, or we can keep that money for future projects. So it's kind of getting a double whammy out of the money. We'll use it for Project Corner, then when we get it back, we can use it for other projects to get a return on our investment. And also, I checked with the comptroller's office. Another option in getting the 800,000 is opening up a line of credit with a bank of our choosing. And in doing so, we wouldn't need to advertise that we are purchasing a property. The state has put in this provision in place to protect the EDCs. So if we go to the bank and get a line of credit and we get 800,000, we could turn around, purchase the property without having to advertise. And that's so that way, because when we advertise that we're buying this property, that could just lead somebody in the private sector to say, well, I'm going to buy it and now I'm going to sell it to the city for double the price. So the provision is there in place to protect the EDC so we can buy it without having to advertise. When we sell it, that's when we have to advertise that we're selling it to so-and-so and have public hearings and whatnot. If we go the bond route, I believe we have to advertise, correct? Correct. So that's another thing to keep in mind. All we're looking at today is refinancing the leverage fund, and in doing so, if we want to position ourselves for Project Corner and that project. Well, the only thing is that is the timeline, the time frame. If we're going to meet that, we may, if we don't take action right now, it may have to get to the point where we have a special called meeting to meet that timeline of closing before December 31st.
Okay, so to try to sum all of this up for me, I think a little bit more than smaller than bigger. So our current debt is $3,448,314. If we go with scenario one, which is extension and a cash flow relief, it'll cost us $243,692. If we go with scenario two, which is just fixed rate interest rate, no extension, it'll only cost us $16,988.
Scenario 2?
Yeah. Which is
Wait.
just no extension, fixed interest rate only. If we go to scenario one, asking for another 800 grand, that's gonna cost us in the end $1,518,203. If we go to scenario two for the 800 grand, which is preliminary cash flows including the bonds, scenario two, that'll cost us $1,291,499. That's the way I like to see things. So that's what it's gonna cost us, and we borrow 800 grand at a price of 1.5 or a price of 1.2, 1.3, or we want to just refinance.
We'll be paying back $491,499, we'll go with a one. We're gonna get 800, but to get to the 291,49, we'll borrow, actually, to pay the actual, it will be 491 additional from the 800,000.
If we table, how are we cutting it close?
In front of us and decide what we want to do. But like Mr. Velez tells us, is our plan to acquire some land or not? Do we need the 800 grand? Is that in our vision right now? Do we want to borrow money to do that, or we want to?
Or do we want to position ourselves so we can take on that?
We definitely want to, I think, want to refinance, taking advantage of a fixed interest rate and get the tax exempt status. That's a no-brainer. That we want to do. Do we want to take on more debt is the question here, I think.
Can we do that and wait on the next? Can we do what's needed and then,
I think so,
additional
right?
money later?
Yes, the new money is in pennies, okay? It's just, it's not necessarily part of the plan of finance, if you will. It's an appendix, it's an adage. But what you need to keep in mind is how you position yourself with the Texas leverage? Do you want to go short or do you want to go long? Because that's going to impact the 800,000.
And that's all that's on the agenda. The new money, extra money, that's a separate item, separate day.
So even though it's a separate item, at a later date, it's the decision you make on the refunding of the Texas Leverage Fund is important because it positions you either to accomplish this at a lower cost or accomplish this at a higher cost, if that makes sense. Yes, sir.
What's the cost if we just do the refinancing of the Texas Leverage Fund? What's the cost for that? Just the refinancing at a interest rate? Closing costs for the transaction?
I believe it said $65,000?
It's the 65,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so if you do the refinance plus the extension of the additional 800,000, is that an additional?
That's an additional cost, and it would be in the next year.
Okay.
But like I said, the real question is, if you authorize the refunding, as you say, which is the important component, do you go with the same structure in terms of the existing maturity, or do you extend it?
We'll get more flow if we extend, obviously, this is what he's showing us here, but it'll cost us $243,000.
Not the only option we have to bring in cash. As Villarreal mentioned, that there's another option. If we want to explore other options, there's others out there.
And I think we could anticipate sales tax going up as well. I'm kind of optimistic about that. What are the wishes of the board? Are you prepared to take action on one of these scenarios? We've got 4 scenarios before us.
We can only take action on 2. The scenario, the page 18 and 20, that's not up for action at this today, no. It's just to show.
Either we refinance and extend, or we refinance and not extend.
That's the question.
Extending, let's go back and look at that again.
Mr. Vela, if we don't extend, do we still have the capacity to take on 800,000?
You have the capacity to do the 8,000, but your total annual commitment goes up.
Yeah, it'll dip into our cash flows, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Cash flow if we extend. Let's see here.
That's on, I believe,
That's page 12?
let's start with what it is today. Your total commitments right now are in the 330-something range. Let me get my glasses.
Current is 3,448,000, no? That's our current debt service obligation. That's what I'm seeing on page 6. 3,448,314. Page 9, which is the first scenario, extending, it goes, our obligation goes to 3,692,006, which is an increase of 243,000. But we're seeing surplus cash flow go up from 592 to 594, 589 to 667.
keeps us at 3,400,000, right?
Scenario two, we just go up by 16,988. We're just gonna go fixed interest rate
Bought the interest and,
and same term.
Same
Nada,
term.
no hicimos nada. All we did was fixed interest rate, no extension. That's the least impactful. But we get no new money or no additional cash flow or nothing.
I'm inclined to do that and then, cross the bridge whenever we do need more money later. I mean, unless we need the money now.
Bella,
December 19th is the deadline for,
Like Mr. Villarreal says, I think we need to act pretty soon because of coming into the end of the year and there's some things that need to be done.
Bella, on the fixed interest rate, you don't know for certain what the rate would be. And can we negotiate, in other words, like, can we go out to the marketplace to try to see if maybe we get some different options in terms of the fixed rate, or is that just the rate that you would propose?
The way that we were envisioning of selling the paper would be to bid this out to banks across the state, and in some cases, even on a national basis, okay? Get some of the banks, some of the participants, and we would be using a private placement agent, which would be one arm between us and the banks, if you will. They would act in the middle, and they would secure, we would put together a term sheet, and we would put together the necessary financials of the EDC, and the bids would come in, and we would rate the bids. That would be one way. Another way would be.
Just for the benefit of the board, so there is a possibility that, you know, you may get a 5% interest rate, you could get a 5.25% interest rate, you could get something higher, something lower. Those options are there.
Yes, sir, and that's the reason why I said that until we get into the market, we're estimating, you know, in the fives, but we really don't know of market conditions on the day of market.
President, if, I got a couple of things in reference to that corner property, and it seems like we really need to make a decision. Yes, let's go on executive session, that's what,
You have some questions?
Yeah, if there's a legal question or a economic development question, then we can entertain those in executive and then come back and make a decision on this one. If that's what you all want to do.
Well,
Okay, then we will temporarily not act on this until we were gonna go into executive session first, and then see what comes out of there, and then we'll come back and take action on this item. So, in accordance with Chapter 551 Texas Government Code, Vernon, Texas Code annotated, the San Juan Economic Development Corporation Board will now go into executive session. It is 6:39. We're now in executive session. Okay, it is now 7:55, and we are now out of executive session. I now open this San Juan Economic Development Corporation meeting back to order. As discussed in executive session, we're on item 4.3.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I got a motion and a second to approve item 4.3 as discussed in executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to executive session item 5B. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve as discussed in executive session.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We'll move on to, there was no action required on 5A. So now we will go to 5C. Got a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. No action is required on 5D. So we'll move on to 5E.
Discuss in executive session.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 7 is adjournment. You got a motion?
Motion.
Got a motion
Second.
to adjourn and a second.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.